There is a man sitting at a feast in a kingdom that is not his. Nobody at that table knows his name. He arrived out of the sea 2 days ago with nothing. No ship, no crew, no proof of anything he says. They have fed him, they have been kind. And now, as the wine goes round, the king calls for entertainment. A blind singer stands up to perform the most popular song of the age, the story of the war at Troy. The singer gets to the part about a Greek soldier, a famous one, a trick with a wooden horse. And the stranger at the table pulls his cloak over his head and starts to cry. He is crying because the song is about him. He is crying because everyone in that room believes the man in the song is dead. And so does everyone back home. He has been trying to reach that home for 10 years. He is going to need 3 more. And when he finally walks through his own front door, he is going to kill 108 men in his own dining hall. His name is Odysseus. And in that moment, Homer does something almost no adaptation keeps. He compares the crying man to a woman. Not to a hero, not to a lion, not to a storm, to a woman lying across the body of her husband who has just been killed defending their city, as enemy soldiers close in to drag her away into slavery. That is the image the poem chooses for the greatest soldier alive. The man who sacked cities is being compared to the women he made. This is the whole story, not the highlights, the whole thing. What happened before the war, during it, and after. Every monster, every island, every lie. What the archaeology in Turkey actually proves and what it very much does not. The parts of the poem that adaptations quietly delete because modern audiences would not forgive them. What happens after he gets home, which is not where the story ends, and how he dies, which Homer never tells us, so other people had to invent it. And at the end, the question the whole thing is built around. A question that is not really about Greece, or gods, or monsters at all. Can a person survive 20 years of war, and loss, and change, and still come home as the same person? Let's find out. Start with the first word. Not the first word of the story, the first word of the poem. Ancient Greek epic puts its subject first, and the very first word of the Odyssey is andra, man. Sing to me of the man, not the hero, not the king, the man. And the word Homer uses to describe him 4 words later is polytropos, literally of many turns. Translators have been fighting over it for 400 years because it means at least 3 things at once, and English will only carry 1 at a time. A man of many journeys, someone turned this way and that by the world. A man of many methods, someone who can turn a situation. And if you want it darker, a man of many faces, someone who turns into whoever he needs to be. Emily Wilson, whose translation was the first published English Odyssey by a woman, chose the word complicated, which is either a betrayal of the Greek or the most honest thing anyone has ever done to it. Here is what nobody warns you about this poem. Odysseus is not a good man. He is brave. He is loyal to the idea of home in a way that is almost frightening. He is, without question, the cleverest person in any room he walks into. He is also a liar, a raider, a man who gets his entire crew killed, a man whose pride costs him a decade, and a man who, at the end, walks through his own house, killing people for an entire afternoon, and then goes upstairs to see his wife. Even his name says it. In Book 19, the poem stops the story to explain where the name Odysseus came from. His grandfather named him, and the poem builds that name out of a Greek verb. A verb that means, roughly, to be hated, to give and to receive pain. His name means trouble in both directions. The one who suffers and the one who causes it. Hold on to that. Everything he does for the next 20 years is contained in it. The war starts at a wedding. And here's the first thing to be honest about, right at the start, because it matters for the next hour. Almost none of what you are about to hear is in Homer. The Iliad and the Odyssey are two poems. They are not an encyclopedia of Greek myth. They assume you already know the background, the way a war film assumes you know there was a war. The famous set pieces everyone associates with Troy, the golden apple, the beauty contest, the wooden horse itself, they are either barely mentioned or completely absent. They come from a set of other epics written later, which told the rest of the story. Scholars call them the epic cycle. And they are gone, every one of them. What we have are summaries written centuries afterwards, and quotations inside other people's books. So, the wedding. A sea goddess marries a mortal man. Every god is invited except one, the goddess of discord. She turns up anyway and throws a golden apple into the hall, marked for the most beautiful. 3 goddesses claim it. A Trojan prince named Paris is made to judge. Each goddess offers him a bribe. He takes the one that offers him the most beautiful woman in the world. The problem is that she is already married to a Greek king. Her name is Helen. And years before, every powerful man in Greece was competing to marry her. Somebody proposed a way to stop the losers going to war over the winner. Make them all swear an oath. Whoever she chooses, the rest of you defend that marriage forever. The man who reportedly suggested that oath was Odysseus, which is the first joke the universe plays on him. Because when Paris takes Helen to Troy, that oath is what drags 1,000 ships across the Aegean. And Odysseus, who invented the trap, is caught in it. He does not want to go. There is a story, again not in Homer, that he tried to get out of it. That when the recruiters came to Ithaca, he pretended to have lost his mind. He went out to plow his fields, sowing salt instead of seed. And that one of the recruiters, unconvinced, picked up Odysseus's infant son and laid him in the path of the plow. Odysseus turned the plow aside. And that was that. He was sane, he was caught, and he went to war. Remember that image? A man swerving a blade away from his baby son. Because the next time Odysseus sees Telemachus, that baby will be 20 years old and will not recognize his father's face. Here is a thing that surprises almost everyone. The Iliad, the great poem of the Trojan War, 16,000 lines long. It does not contain the Trojan horse. It does not contain the fall of Troy. It does not contain the death of Achilles. The Iliad covers about 7 weeks in the 10th year. Its subject is announced in its own first word, and its first word is not war. It is menace, wrath, the rage of one man, Achilles, who is insulted by his own commander and withdraws from the fighting, and lets his own side be slaughtered for it, for weeks, out of pride. That is the poem, a war epic about a soldier refusing to fight. And Odysseus is in it, but he is not the star. He is the one they send when a situation needs talking, not stabbing. When the army panics and tries to sail home, he is the one who physically stops them. When somebody has to go into Achilles' tent and negotiate, they send him. When somebody has to sneak into the enemy camp at night and cut throats in the dark, they send him for that too. He is the army's fixer. And even in the Iliad, there is a faint discomfort around him. He is useful in a way that is not entirely admirable. Meanwhile, the war grinds. 10 years. Not 10 years of battle. 10 years of siege and boredom and disease and raiding the countryside for food. And men getting old on a beach a long way from anywhere. Achilles kills Hector, Troy's greatest defender, and drags his body behind a chariot. The Iliad ends there, with a father begging for his son's corpse. Everything after that comes from somewhere else. One morning, the Trojans wake up, and the Greeks are gone. The camp is empty, the ships are gone from the bay, and standing on the sand, enormous, is a wooden horse. You know what happens next. What you may not know is where the story actually comes from, because it is barely in Homer at all. The Odyssey mentions it twice, briefly, as something already famous. Helen refers to it, the blind singer performs it as a hit song. That is nearly all we get. The version everyone knows comes from a Roman poet, Virgil, in the Aeneid, roughly 700 years after Homer. The priest who warns them and is killed by serpents, the Greek left behind to lie, the city dying room by room. And Virgil is not a neutral witness. He is writing Rome's national epic. And in Rome's version, the Trojans are the good guys, and their descendants found Rome. The idea itself is Odysseus's. Every source agrees on that. The horse is his mind, made out of timber, a thing that looks like a gift and is actually a delivery mechanism for men with knives. And what happens next is the part adaptations compress into a montage. The Greeks burn the city, they kill the men, they take the women. Hector's widow is dragged off as a prize. Hector's infant son is thrown from the walls, so that nobody grows up to rebuild the city and come looking. Priam, the old king, is butchered at an altar. In some later traditions, the man who argues for killing that child is Odysseus. We will come back to that. The Greeks themselves spent the next few centuries getting steadily less comfortable with him. The Greeks win. And then something goes wrong. Because on the night of the sack, in the burning city, they commit sacrilege. They drag a priestess from a temple. They loot the gods' own houses. And the gods, who had been backing them for 10 years, change their minds. Almost nobody gets home cleanly. One king is shipwrecked. One is blown to Egypt and spends years getting back. And the commander of the whole expedition sails home to a hero's welcome and is murdered in his own house on the first night by his wife and her lover. That story hangs over the entire Odyssey like a held breath. A soldier comes home from Troy. His wife has been waiting. It goes catastrophically wrong. Odysseus is about to spend 10 years sailing towards exactly that. Now stop the story and go and stand somewhere real. Northwest Turkey, a low mound above a coastal plain, a few kilometers from the mouth of the Dardanelles, the strait that connects the Aegean to the Black Sea, and has been worth fighting over for 4,000 years. The locals call the place Hisarlik, place of fortresses. And it is a fortress, 9 of them, stacked on top of each other. That is what a tell is. A city that keeps burning down and getting rebuilt on its own rubble. Until after 3,000 years, the town is sitting on a hill made of itself. The man usually credited with finding Troy is Heinrich Schliemann. He started digging in 1870. That credit is not quite fair. An Englishman named Frank Calvert already owned part of the mound. He had already dug into it and already told Schliemann this was the place. Schliemann's method was, by modern standards, a catastrophe. He wanted Homer's Troy, and he wanted it fast. So he cut an enormous trench straight down through the mound, through the very layers he was looking for. In 1873, he found a hoard of gold and called it Priam's treasure. It was not Priam's. It was from Troy too, over 1,000 years too early. So which layer, if any, could be the Troy of the story? The two candidates are Troy 6 and Troy 7a. Troy 6 is the grand one. Big walls, a real city. Destroyed around 1300 BC. And the damage pattern suggests earthquake rather than war. Troy 7a is the one that keeps archaeologists interested. It was destroyed by fire around 1180 BC. And the details of that layer are suggestive. Storage jars sunk into house floors, as if a population was crammed inside the walls. Bronze arrowheads, sling bullets, human remains that were never buried properly. Then there is the evidence that does not come out of the ground at Troy at all. It comes from the archives of an empire Homer never mentions. The Hittites ran most of Anatolia in the late Bronze Age. And unlike the Greeks of that era, their records survive. Thousands of clay tablets. In those tablets, there is a kingdom on their western frontier called Wilusa. Most linguists connect Wilusa with the Greek Wilios, the older form of Ilios, which is the other name for Troy, and the name the Iliad is named after. There is a treaty from around 1280 BC between the Hittite king and the ruler of Wilusa. The ruler's name is Alexandru. Paris, the Trojan prince who took Helen, has a second name in the Iliad. It is Alexandros. A name is not a person, and the treaty is a century before any plausible war. The tablets also mention a foreign power across the water, Ahayawa, which most scholars identify with the Achaeans, Homer's usual word for the Greeks. And they record friction, raids, a Hittite king complaining, in writing, about hostilities involving Wilusa. So here is the honest summary. There was a real, strategically valuable city at the mouth of the Dardanelles. It was called something very like Ilios. It was burned down violently at roughly the right time. There was a Greek-speaking power that raided that coast, and both sides left documents saying so. What there is not anywhere is evidence of this war. No Helen, no 10-year siege, no horse, nothing that names Achilles, or Agamemnon, or Odysseus. And there is one more piece, which is my favorite, because it is small and strange. In the Iliad, Homer describes a helmet made of rows of boar's tusks sewn onto leather. It is an odd, specific, useless detail. Nobody in Homer's own time wore anything like it. Archaeologists have dug up boar's tusk helmets from Mycenaean graves from 400 years before Homer. Something in this tradition remembers. Not accurately, not reliably, but a thread of real objects made it across 400 years of darkness, carried by nothing but people singing. Which brings us to the darkness itself. Around 1200 BC, the Bronze Age world falls apart. Palaces burn from Greece to Syria, the Hittite Empire ends. Writing stops. The Greek script of that era simply disappears. And Greece does not read or write again for something like 4 centuries. Somewhere at the far end of that darkness, the poems we have get written down. Homer is describing a world that had already been gone for 400 years. A memory of a memory of a memory, sung across the dark. Now, back to the man on the beach. 12 ships leave Troy. Roughly 600 men. Odysseus, king of a small, rocky island in the west, is going home. It should take him about 3 weeks. The first thing he does is attack somebody. Not a monster, not a god, a city. A real one on the Thracian coast, belonging to a people called the Cyclops, who had done nothing to him. He and his men sack the town, kill the men, and divide up the women and the property, then settle down on the beach to eat and drink their way through it. This is the hero, in his own words. He tells this story himself at a dinner party, without embarrassment. Because in his world, it is not shameful. It is what a returning army does. What happens next is that his men will not leave. He tells them to get back on the ships. They ignore him. They stay on the beach drinking, and the Cyclops come back with reinforcements from inland. By the time Odysseus gets his fleet off the sand, 72 men are dead. 6 from every ship. He counts them. Remember this, because it is the pattern of the entire journey. In almost every adaptation drops it. Odysseus's men do not obey him. He is not a commander who leads a loyal crew to their doom. He is a commander who is repeatedly, catastrophically ignored. Then a storm takes them, and the world changes. Because from this point, the map runs out. Everything up to now has been real geography: Troy, Thrace, the North Aegean. What comes next is nowhere. The poem stops naming places you can sail to. Ancient readers noticed. The geographer Strabo records an earlier scholar dismissing the whole search. "You will find the route," he said, "when you find the man who stitched the bag of the winds." 9 days of wind. And then an island where the people are eating a flower. The lotus does not kill you. That is what makes it the most frightening thing in the poem so far. The men who eat it simply stop wanting to go home. They are not enchanted, or imprisoned, or hurt. They are content. Odysseus drags them back to the ships by force, weeping, and ties them under the benches. Every monster in this story is really the same monster. Every one of them offers him a version of stay. And the next one is going to cost him everything. They find an island with goats on it, and no people. They eat well for the first time in weeks. And across a narrow channel, there is a mainland, with smoke rising from it. And Odysseus decides to go and see who lives there. He does not need to. He has food, he has ships, nobody is chasing him. He goes because he wants to know. He takes 12 men and a skin of the strongest wine he owns, and they walk into a cave the size of a church, full of cheeses and lambs and enormous milk pails, and they sit down and wait for the owner to come home. That is the whole disaster in one sentence. They could have taken the cheese and left. His men beg him to take the cheese and leave. He wants to meet the owner. He wants a guest gift. There is a word for what he is counting on. Exina, the sacred obligation between a host and a guest. A host must feed a stranger before he even asks his name, and give him a gift when he goes. Every monster in this poem is defined by breaking that rule. The owner comes home. He is the size of a mountain crag. He has one eye, and he rolls a stone across the door that 20 wagons could not move. His name is Polyphemus. His father is Poseidon, god of the sea. He asks who they are. Odysseus gives the guest speech. We are Greeks. We are far from home. The gods protect strangers. And Polyphemus answers by picking up 2 of the men and eating them. He eats 2 more in the morning, then goes out with his flocks and rolls the stone back across the door, sealing the rest of them in a larder. And here Odysseus does the thing he is famous for. Not courage, arithmetic. He cannot kill the giant because only the giant can move the door. So he does not kill him. He gets him drunk on the strong wine. And while the giant is drinking, they have this exchange. What is your name? My name is Nobody. Then they take a stake of olive wood and sharpen it and harden the point in the fire and drive it into the sleeping giant's eye. And when he screams, the other Cyclops come running from all over the mountain and shout through the stone, "Who is hurting you?" And he answers, "Nobody is hurting me." So they go home. And there is a second layer to this joke that only works in Greek. There are 2 words for nobody, outis and metis. And the form that comes out when the neighbors report it is metis, which sounds exactly like Matisse. Metis is the Greek word for cunning intelligence. It is the quality Odysseus is defined by. It is practically his job title. The giant is standing there, blind, howling that he has been destroyed by cunning. And not one of his neighbors hears it. They escape in the morning, tied under the bellies of the sheep. And they are safe. They are on the ships. They are rowing away. It is over. He has won. And then Odysseus stands up in the stern and shouts back at the shore. His men beg him to stop. He shouts again. And what he shouts is not a taunt. It is a resume. He tells the blind giant his real name, his father's name, and the name of his island. Why? Because a blind giant on a nowhere island is going to tell people. Because a story about a monster defeated by nobody is a story with no hero in it. Because glory only works if your name is attached. He trades 10 years of his life for a credit. Polyphemus lifts his hands and prays to his father. Let him never get home. Or if he must get home, let him come late and broken, having lost every man, in someone else's ship, and let him find trouble in his house. Every single clause of that curse comes true, exactly as spoken. It is the plot of the remaining 12 books. the sea god hears his son. And from this moment, Odysseus is not traveling. He is being hunted. One footnote, because it is interesting and unproven. In 1914, a paleontologist suggested where the idea of a one-eyed giant might have come from. Dwarf elephants once lived on the Mediterranean islands, and their skulls are about twice the size of a human skull, with an enormous hole in the center of the face where the trunk attached. Find one in a cave with no idea what an elephant is, and you might reasonably conclude a giant with one eye used to live there. No ancient text shows anyone doing that. It is a modern guess. The next island belongs to a minor god of the winds, who is friendly and who does something extraordinarily kind. He catches every storm wind there is and puts them in a leather bag, ties it with silver wire, and stows it in the ship's hold. Then leaves out one gentle wind, the one that blows towards Ithaca. For 9 days, Odysseus sails home. He does not sleep. He holds the sheet himself the entire way because he does not trust anyone else with it. On the 10th day, they see Ithaca. They are close enough to see people on the shore, tending their fires. And Odysseus, who has not slept in 9 days, falls asleep. And his men, who have watched him hoard a mysterious bag the whole voyage, who assume it is treasure, who assume he is going to walk into his palace rich while they go home with nothing. They open it. Every storm in the world comes out at once. They are blown all the way back. The wind god refuses to help again. A man this hated by the gods, he says, is not someone you assist. And this is the crucial thing. That disaster is a leadership failure. He did not tell them what was in the bag. He kept the secret because he did not trust them. And the secret is exactly what destroyed them. The next island is worse. A people called the Laestrygonians, who look like people and are not. They stand on the cliffs above the harbor where the fleet has moored, and drop boulders onto the ships, then spear the men in the water like fish. 11 ships, every man on board. Odysseus survives only because he moored his own ship outside the harbor. The one time his suspicion saves lives. 12 ships left Troy, 1 is left. An island, a house in a clearing, with smoke coming from it. And around the house are wolves and mountain lions that do not attack. They fawn like dogs. Inside is a goddess, weaving, singing. Half the crew go in. She feeds them, drugs the food, touches them with a wand, and they become pigs. Real pigs. Bristles, snouts, penned in a sty, and fed acorns. And the poem says the terrible part out loud. Their minds stay human. Odysseus goes to get them. On the way, he is intercepted by Hermes, who gives him a plant. Moly, black root, white flower. It makes him immune. And instructions. When she strikes at you, draw your sword and go for her. He does. She is astonished. No man has ever resisted the drug. And she immediately understands who he must be. And then she offers to take him to bed. And Odysseus, with a sword out, negotiates. He will not go to bed with a goddess who has just turned his crew into livestock, unless she swears a formal oath not to harm him. She swears, he goes. Adaptations usually make this a seduction. In the poem, it is a hostage negotiation that ends in bed. She restores his men. And then, this is the part that gets cut, they stay. For a year. Feasting, comfortable, safe. And it is not Odysseus who ends it. At the end of the year, his own men have to come to him and remind him that they have a home. The poem never calls this a failure, it just lets you notice. Circe agrees to let them go, but she tells him he cannot sail home yet. First, he has to go somewhere else. He has to go to the land of the dead and find the ghost of a blind prophet and ask him the way. His crew weep when they hear it. The poem says they tore their hair. At the edge of the world, there is a place where the sun never shines. and a shore where two rivers of the underworld meet. Odysseus digs a pit and pours offerings into it: milk, honey, wine, water, barley, then cuts the throats of a ram and a black ewe and lets the blood run in. And the dead come up out of the dark to drink it. Brides, old men, young men still in their armor, girls, and they come in such numbers that he is frightened. He has to hold them off with his sword, because the prophet has to drink first. 4 encounters in that gray place. Everyone lands somewhere different. First, the prophet. Tiresias tells him the route home and the price. "You will get back," he says, "late, alone, on someone else's ship, and you will find your house full of insolent men." He also tells him something almost nobody remembers. We will come back to it at the end of this film, because it means the story does not finish where you think it finishes. Second, his mother. He did not know she was dead. She was alive when he left for Troy. She comes to the pit with the others, and he has to stand there and refuse to let his own mother drink until the prophet has finished speaking. And when he finally does, and she recognizes him, he asks her how she died. She tells him it was not illness, it was not age. She died of missing him. He tries 3 times to hold her. 3 times she goes through his arms like smoke, and she explains, quite gently, that this is simply what the dead are now. Third, the commander. Agamemnon, who sailed home first and was killed at his own table. He describes the murder, and then gives Odysseus advice. And the advice is poison. Never trust a woman. Never tell your wife everything. Come home in secret. He half corrects himself. Your wife is not like mine, he says. Penelope is wise. But the damage is done. That warning is why Odysseus will not walk in and announce himself. It is why he tests his own household. It is why he lies to his wife's face for 2 days. Fourth, the greatest soldier who ever lived. Odysseus tries to comfort Achilles. You were honored like a god when you were alive, he says. And now you rule among the dead. Do not grieve. And Achilles tells him not to sell him on death. He says he would rather be alive as a hired hand, working the fields of a landless, penniless man, than be king of all the dead. That single speech is the hinge of the whole poem. The Iliad is about a man who chooses glory. The Odyssey is about a man who chooses to go home. And here in the dark, the first one tells the second that he was wrong. One more ghost, and this one says nothing at all. Ajax, who killed himself after Odysseus beat him in a contest. He comes to the edge of the pit. He listens to Odysseus apologize, and turns and walks away into the dark, without a single word. Odysseus leaves. He has his route home. He also has a piece of information he is going to keep to himself, and it is going to get more people killed. Everybody knows the Sirens. Almost everybody has them wrong. In the poem, the Sirens are not beautiful. Homer never describes what they look like. The bird women of Greek art come later. There are not 3 of them. The grammar Homer uses is the dual form, which means exactly 2. And they are not offering sex. Read what they actually sing. They call Odysseus by name and by reputation. They say, "We know everything that happened at Troy. We know everything that happens on the earth. Come and listen." They are not selling pleasure, they are selling knowledge, which is a far more precise trap for this particular man. We have already watched him walk into a giant's cave, for no reason except that he wanted to know who lived there. His solution is famous and worth looking at closely, because it is not brave, it is engineering. Wax in the crew's ears so they cannot hear. His own ears left open because he wants to hear it, and his body lashed to the mast, with standing orders that if he begs to be untied, they tie him tighter. He builds a system that assumes his own future self cannot be trusted. He hears it. He screams to be released. They tie him down harder and row past, and the sea goes quiet. He is the only person in the story who hears the sirens and lives. He never tells us what they sang. Then a strait, and the worst decision in the poem. On one side, a whirlpool that swallows the sea 3 times a day and vomits it back. On the other, a cliff with a cave in it, and in the cave, a thing with 6 heads on 6 long necks, which fishes. Circe had already briefed him. "Do not fight her," she said. "There is nothing to fight. She is not mortal. Do not go near the whirlpool, or you lose the ship and everyone on it. Go close to the cliff and row hard." And she told him the price: 6 men, 6 heads, 1 each, every time. He knows. He knows before he enters the strait that 6 specific human beings are going to be picked off his deck and eaten. And there is nothing he can do because the alternative is losing all of them. And he does not tell the crew. He says so himself in the narration. He admits he kept it from them, and he admits why. Because if they knew, they would have stopped rowing and hidden below deck. And then everyone dies. It is arguably the correct decision. It is also the coldest thing he does in the entire poem. And he tells the story afterwards to a room full of strangers at a dinner party. 6 men are lifted off the deck. He says that of everything he suffered searching the sea, this was the most pitiable thing he ever saw. The sight of them, still calling his name, held up in the air. There is one more instruction, and it is the simplest one he has been given. There is an island with cattle on it. They belong to the sun. Do not touch them. He tries to sail past. His crew, exhausted and starving, refuse. They want 1 night ashore. He makes every man swear an oath not to touch the cattle. Then the wind turns against them and holds for a month. The food runs out. They eat birds and fish, whatever they can catch, and it is not enough. They are starving on a beach, surrounded by fat cattle they have sworn not to eat. And one day, Odysseus goes inland to pray and falls asleep. He keeps falling asleep at exactly the wrong moment. It happened with the Bag of Winds. It happens again here. And while he is asleep, his second in command makes an argument. And it is very hard to answer. All deaths are bad, he says, but the worst death is starvation. If the sun god sinks our ship for it, fine. Better to drown quickly than to starve slowly on this beach. The poem gives the mutineers a genuinely reasonable case. They are not fools. They are starving. They kill the cattle. Odysseus wakes to the smell of roasting meat and knows immediately that everyone is dead. They sail. A storm hits. The mast snaps. The ship breaks apart. Every man drowns except one. 600 men left Troy with him. He is now alone in the water, holding a piece of his own ship, and the current is carrying him back towards the whirlpool. The poem's opening lines told us this would happen. It says he could not save his companions, and it says why. They died through their own recklessness. The poem goes out of its way to absolve him. Whether it is right too is a question the poem leaves open. Because we have just spent 4 books watching a man conceal, withhold, and fall asleep. He washes up on an island called Ogygia, and the story stops for 7 years. 7. Of the 10 years between Troy and Ithaca, 7 of them are spent here, in one place, with a goddess named Calypso. Her name comes from a Greek verb, kalypto, to cover, to conceal, to hide. She is not a monster. That is what makes this the hardest chapter in the poem. She loves him, she keeps him, and she offers him something nobody else in Greek myth is ever offered and refuses. She offers to make him immortal. Not just alive forever, ageless. Never sick, never old, never dying, on a beautiful island with a goddess. He says no. And the poem tells us how he spends his days. He sits on the rocks at the edge of the sea and weeps, looking at the water. Every day, for years. And then it tells us what happens at night. The Greek says he lay with her, unwilling, beside the willing. He does not want to be there. He goes anyway. She is a goddess, he is on her island, and there is no ship. Translations vary a great deal in how directly they render that line. She only lets him go because she is ordered to. The gods hold a council. Athena argues for him. Hermes is sent with an instruction. And Calypso is furious. She points out, correctly, that male gods take mortal lovers constantly, and nobody interferes. Then she helps him build a raft, gives him tools, food, wine, and a fair wind, and lets him go. Before he goes, she asks him one question. She asks whether Penelope is more beautiful than she is, and his answer is the single best thing he says in the whole poem. He says, "Of course not. You are a goddess. She is mortal. She will age and die, and you will not. And I know it. And I want to go home anyway." Given a choice between a perfect life and his own life, he chooses his own. Not because it is better, because it is his. Then Poseidon sees him on the open water and smashes the raft. And he swims for 2 days. He is thrown up on a beach, naked, crusted in salt, more dead than alive. And he crawls under a bush and buries himself in leaves to survive the night. In the morning, he is woken by girls laughing. A princess named Nausicaa has come down to the river to wash clothes, and her ball has gone into the water. And this filthy, naked wreck of a man comes out of the bushes holding a branch, and has to talk his way out of the worst first impression in literature. He does it with a compliment so well judged that she gives him clothes, food, and directions. These are the Phaeacians. They are the last stop. Famous sailors, generous, and they will take him home. And that night, at the feast, the blind singer stands up and sings about the wooden horse. That is where this film began. Now you know why he is crying. The king notices. A good host watches his guests and asks the question that has been waiting for 8 books. Who are you? And Odysseus, for the first time in the poem, tells the truth. He says his name, and then he tells them everything. The lotus, the cave, the bag of winds, Circe, the dead, the Sirens, the 6 men lifted off the deck, the cattle, the 7 years. And here is the fact almost nobody notices. Books 9 through 12 of the Odyssey, the monsters, the whole famous section, everything this film just walked you through. None of it is narrated by Homer. It is told by Odysseus at a dinner party in the first person to an audience he is trying to persuade to give him a ship. The only witness to the Cyclops is a magnificent liar who will invent 5 entirely false life stories within 2 books. Ancient and modern readers have both noticed. The poem never resolves it. They give him the ship, they load it with treasure, they sail him home while he sleeps, and lay him on the beach of Ithaca, still asleep, with the gifts stacked beside him. He has been gone 20 years. He wakes up and does not recognize his own country. Now go back 20 years and stay in one place, because there is a second story running the whole time, and it is the one the poem actually opens with. Not the monsters, the house. The first 4 books of the Odyssey are not about Odysseus at all. He does not appear until book 5. Adaptations cut this section more often than any other part of the poem, which is a shame. It is where the emotional architecture is built. Here is the situation on Ithaca. A king vanished 20 years ago. No body, no grave, no proof. His wife cannot mourn him because there is nothing to mourn. And she cannot remarry because he might walk in tomorrow. And into that gap, over years, came the suitors. They are young noblemen from Ithaca and the islands around it. They have moved into the palace and refused to leave. They are not besieging it, they are eating it. Every day they slaughter more of his livestock, drink his wine, order his slaves around, and pressure his wife to choose one of them. There are 108 of them. That number matters, and adaptations almost always shrink it, because 108 is not a love triangle. It is an occupation. The estate is being consumed. When it is gone, so is Telemachus's inheritance. And so, probably, is Telemachus, because no new king wants the old king's son alive. And here is the thing the poem builds its whole moral case on. The suitors are guests. They are not invaders. They came through the front door, and they were let in. And then they abused the house that fed them. They are Xenia, turned inside out. Every monster he met at sea was a bad host. The men in his own dining room are bad guests. Penelope, she is not a woman sitting patiently by a window. And the poem is not remotely subtle about this. Homer's standing epithet for her is periphron, circumspect, thinking around things. It is the same family of praise the poem gives Odysseus. She is his equal, and the poem says so structurally. And the shroud proves it. She tells the suitors she will choose one of them as soon as she finishes weaving. A burial shroud for her husband's aged father, because it would be shameful for a great man to be buried without one. Nobody can argue with that. It is unimpeachably pious. So she weaves all day, and every night, by torchlight, she unpicks what she wove. She does it for 3 years. 108 armed men in her house, held off with a piece of cloth. She only loses because one of her own slave women tells them. Telemachus. He was a baby when his father left. He is 20 now, and he has never met him. His position is unbearable in a way the poem is very precise about. He is old enough to inherit, and too young to hold anything. He cannot throw the suitors out. There are 108 of them, and one of him. He cannot ask his mother to remarry, because he cannot afford to repay her dowry. He cannot even leave. He grew up in a house full of men eating his father's food and laughing at him. Athena comes to him in disguise and tells him to do one thing. Go and find out what happened to your father. So he does. He calls the first assembly on Ithaca in 20 years, and it fails, publicly, humiliatingly. Then he takes a ship and goes anyway. He sails to Pylos and asks old Nestor, who tells him nothing useful. He goes to Sparta and meets Menelaus and Helen. The woman the war was fought over. Now back home, married to the husband she left. Drugging the wine at dinner so the guests can talk about the war without weeping. It is one of the strangest domestic scenes in ancient literature. And Menelaus tells him, your father is alive, trapped on an island. That is all anyone knows. Meanwhile, the suitors, realizing the boy has grown a spine, position a ship in a strait to ambush and kill him on the way home. One more thing about Telemachus, because it is uncomfortable, and it should be. The very first assertion of manhood he makes in the poem is to tell his own mother to be quiet and go back to her room, and to say that speech is the business of men. He is 20. He has just found his voice, and the first thing he does with it is use it on her. The poem presents this as growth. Modern readers rarely can. Both responses are worth holding at once. He wakes on a beach and does not know where he is. Athena has covered the island in mist, and when she appears, disguised as usual, and asks who he is, Odysseus, standing on his own homeland after 20 years, immediately invents a false identity. He lies to the goddess who has protected him for the entire poem, reflexively, for no reason. And she laughs at him. She drops the disguise and tells him, with something close to affection, that he is incorrigible, that even here, even now, he cannot stop. Deception is no longer a tool he uses. It is a reflex he cannot switch off. He will invent at least 5 separate false life stories before this is over. To Athena, to his swineherd, to the suitors, to his wife, and finally to his own father. Elaborate ones, with biographies, and place names, and dead relatives. Then Athena ages him. Skin wrinkled, hair gone, eyes dimmed, rags. Not a costume, a transformation. And the king of Ithaca walks into his own kingdom as a homeless old man. The first person he meets is a swineherd called Eumaeus, who lives in a hut, owns nothing, and has been loyal to a man he believes is dead for 20 years. Eumaeus takes the filthy stranger in, feeds him his own dinner, gives him his own cloak, and apologizes that it is not better. The poem is making a point with a hammer. The poorest man in the story is the only one who gets hospitality exactly right. Telemachus comes home, dodging the ambush, and comes to the hut. Athena removes the disguise for one scene, and father and son meet. And the boy does not believe it. He thinks it is a god playing with him, or a trick. It takes real persuading before he accepts that this is his father. Then they walk to the palace together, and Odysseus goes back to being a beggar. And this is where the poem becomes almost unbearable to read, because he goes into his own house and nobody knows him. He watches the suitors eat his food. One of them throws a footstool at him. He is insulted in his own hall and made to fight another beggar for the entertainment of the men occupying his home. And he takes all of it, because it is not time yet. 2 moments in that stretch land harder than anything else in the poem. The dog. Lying on a pile of dung outside the hall is an old dog covered in ticks that nobody has looked after for years. His name is Argos. Odysseus raised him from a puppy before he left for Troy, and never saw him grown. The dog lifts his head. He knows him instantly. This dog is the first living thing on Ithaca to recognize Odysseus. He is too weak to get up. He can only move his tail and drop his ears. And Odysseus, who cannot break cover, looks away and wipes away a tear so that nobody sees. Then he walks into the house, and Homer says the dog died. The scar. Penelope, who is far too intelligent to ignore a stranger claiming to have news, has the beggar brought to her that night and interviews him. He lies to her, fluently. He gives a detailed false biography, and inside it he plants true details about Odysseus's clothing, things only Odysseus could know, and watches her weep at her own husband's description, while he sits there and says nothing. The poem says his eyes stayed steady, like horn or iron. Then she offers him hospitality, and instructs an old slave woman to wash his feet. The old woman is Euryclea. She nursed him as a baby, and she is washing his legs when her hands find a scar above the knee, from a boar hunt on Mount Parnassus when he was a boy, and the poem stops dead, and tells you the whole story of that hunt, right there, for 70 lines, before it lets her look up. Her hands go slack, she drops his foot, the basin tips over, and the water goes across the floor, and Odysseus grabs her by the throat, and tells her that if she says one word, he will kill her, along with everyone else in the house. This woman raised him. That is not a hero returning. That is a man who has become extremely good at surviving, and has not yet worked out how to stop. The next morning, Penelope announces that she has decided she will marry whichever of them can string her husband's bow, and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads lined up in a row. Here is the detail that matters. That bow is not a war bow. Odysseus never took it to Troy. He left it hanging in the storeroom for 20 years, which means it has not been strung in 20 years. And horn and sinew do not get easier with age. And here is the question the poem refuses to answer. Why now? She announces this contest on the exact evening a mysterious stranger has arrived, claiming to have met her husband, after a conversation in which she has been probing him for hours. Some readers have argued that Penelope knows, not consciously perhaps, but that she has worked it out, and that the contest is her move, not his. That she is handing her husband the only weapon in the building, in front of 108 unarmed men, and calling it a wedding. Most scholars do not accept that reading, but the text permits both, and it is very hard to believe that is an accident. The suitors try, one after another. They warm the bow at the fire, they grease it with fat, and they fail. The best of them cannot bend it. Then the beggar asks for a turn. They laugh at him. Penelope insists, and Telemachus, suddenly and unmistakably a man, orders his mother out of the hall and has the doors shut. And the old man picks up the bow and turns it over in his hands the way a musician checks an instrument, looking for worm damage in the horn. Then he strings it, easily, with one movement. And Homer compares the sound of the string to a singer tuning a lyre. It is the last quiet moment in the poem. He shoots, the arrow goes through all 12. And then he looks at his son, and his son picks up a spear and comes to stand beside him. He steps onto the threshold, the raised stone doorway, the only entrance, and empties the quiver of arrows out at his feet, and says that the contest is finished, and that he will now try another target that no man has hit before. Antinous, the loudest and cruelest of the suitors, is at that exact moment lifting a golden cup of wine to his mouth. He has just tilted it back. The arrow goes through his throat. Homer kills him mid-drink, in the act of consuming Odysseus's property. The whole grievance compressed into one image. And for a moment, the room does not understand. They think it is an accident. They shout at the old beggar for his clumsiness. They still do not know what is standing in the doorway. Then he tells them who he is. And they look for the weapons on the walls. And the weapons are gone. Telemachus moved them in the night. What follows is not a duel. It is one of the most sustained close-quarters massacres in ancient literature. And it takes an entire book of the poem. 4 men against 108 in a sealed room, with the only exit held. It is not clean and it is not quick. The suitors fight, they throw furniture, they get hold of some weapons through a storeroom door left open. And for a while it is genuinely close. Then Athena appears above them and shows the Aegis. And after that, the suitors simply cannot connect. They beg. One of them, the singer, begs and is spared. He was forced to perform. The herald is spared. A priest begs and is killed mid-sentence with his hands out. The poem is careful to show him discriminating. He is not out of control. He is auditing. When it is finished, the floor is covered. Homer's image is fish poured out of a net onto sand, dying in heaps in the sun. And then comes the part that most adaptations delete. And you should know about it, because it is the moment the poem stops being a story about justice. Odysseus asks Euryclea which of the household's 50 slave women slept with the suitors. 12. He has them brought in. He makes them carry the bodies of the men out of the hall. He makes them scrub their own friends' blood off the tables and the floor with sponges. And when the room is clean, he tells Telemachus to take them outside and cut them down with swords. And Telemachus says no, not because it is wrong, because a clean death is too good for them. So he strings a ship's cable between a pillar and the roof and hangs all 12 at once. Homer compares them to thrushes or doves caught in a net and says their feet twitched a little, but not for long. They were slaves. In that household, a slave woman had no meaningful capacity to refuse a nobleman. The poem does not say that. The poem calls them disloyal. And how this passage is translated has become a live issue. Emily Wilson has pointed out that a number of earlier English translators inserted degrading words that are simply not in the Greek. The Greek uses ordinary words for young women. That is not the poem being softened for modern readers. That is the poem being made harsher by its translators for centuries. And then Melanthius the Goatherd, who sided with the suitors, is brought up. And what is done to him is a mutilation the poem describes in full. And this film will not. Odysseus has his house back. He has it back the way a fire has a forest back. He orders sulfur brought and fumigates the hall, because the room has to be purified. Then he goes upstairs to see his wife. Euryclea runs up the stairs to wake Penelope, laughing, and tells her, "Your husband is home. He is downstairs. He killed them all." And Penelope does not believe her. She says it must be a god. She says the old woman is out of her mind. She comes downstairs, and this is the scene. She sits down across the room from him and looks at him and says nothing. Her son loses his temper. He calls her hard-hearted. He says no other woman would sit that far from a husband back after 20 years, and asks what is wrong with her heart. And Penelope answers her son without taking her eyes off the man in the room. She says, "If this is really him, we will know each other, because there are things between us that nobody else knows." Understand her position. There have been 20 years of rumors, 20 years of men arriving with stories about her husband, hoping for a reward. The gods in this poem impersonate people constantly. She has watched Athena do it to her own son, and the man in front of her is covered in blood, looks nothing like the man who left, and has already lied to her once this week. She is not being cold, she is being careful. She is being exactly what the poem always said she was, thinking around it. So she sets a trap. She turns to the servants and says, quite casually, "Move the bed out of the bedroom and make it up for our guest." And the man in the doorway comes apart, because he built that bed. There was an olive tree growing in the courtyard, and he built the bedroom around the living tree. He cut the trunk down to a post and made it one of the 4 bedposts, and inlaid it with gold and silver and ivory. The bed is rooted in the ground. It has never moved, and it cannot be moved, unless somebody has cut through the trunk. And nobody knows that. He built it alone. There were no witnesses. It is the one fact in the world that only 2 living people share. He shouts at her, "Who moved my bed? Who cut my tree?" and describes the whole construction in detail, in a fury. And the moment he does it, he has answered a question he did not know he was being asked. She has done to him exactly what he did to the Cyclops. She has used a lie to make a monster say its own name. The trickster has been tricked by his wife, and it is the only time in the poem it happens. And Homer says her knees went and her heart went, and she ran across the room and put her arms around his neck. And then the image the poem chooses. It does not compare her to a woman finding her husband. It compares her to a drowning man, someone whose ship has been smashed by Poseidon, who has been swimming, who has given up, and who sees land. The poem gives Penelope her husband's own shipwreck to feel. 20 years apart, and it gives them the same simile. She has been drowning in that house exactly as long as he has been drowning in the sea. Homer says they would have wept until dawn, but Athena held the night back and kept the morning under the horizon so they could have longer. And then they go to bed, and afterwards they lie there and tell each other what happened. She tells him about the house, he tells her about the sea, and he tells her the truth, including the 7 years, and the goddess, and every man he lost. The man who lied to everyone in the poem, including her, stops lying here. If the poem ended on that line, it would be perfect. It does not end there. There is one more book, and ancient scholars were already uncomfortable about it. In notes that survive in the margins of medieval manuscripts, two of the great Alexandrian critics are reported to have marked a line in Book 23 as the end of the Odyssey. The line they marked is the one just before the couple go up to bed. What exactly they meant has been argued about for 2,000 years, and it is not settled. Because what follows is strange and unresolved and darker than a happy ending. First, Laertes. Odysseus's father is still alive. He has left the palace. He lives in a hut on a farm. He works in his own orchard, in filthy patched clothes, and he has been grieving his son for 20 years. Odysseus finds him digging around a tree, and he lies to him. He invents another false identity, a stranger from far away who once hosted a man named Odysseus years ago, and stands there and watches his elderly father pour dust over his own head and weep before finally telling him the truth. The poem gives no motive. He simply cannot stop testing people. Many readers find this worse than the massacre because there is no argument for it. He proves who he is with the scar, and then with something better. He walks his father through the orchard, reciting the trees. 13 pear trees, 10 apple, 40 fig. The ones Laertes gave him when he was a little boy, following his father around the garden. That is the second recognition scene built out of a tree, and it is not an accident. Then, the reckoning. Because Odysseus has just killed 108 young noblemen, and every one of them had a father. The families gather, they arm, they come for him, and there is a battle in the fields of Ithaca. Old Laertes kills a man delighted in the last fight of his life, and it is about to become a civil war that will consume the island. And then Athena shouts, and Zeus throws a thunderbolt into the ground in front of her, and the gods simply impose an amnesty. Everyone forgets, peace by decree. That is the last page. Not a wedding, not a coronation. A god ordering an island to pretend nothing happened. And there is the prophecy. Back in the land of the dead, Tiresias told him how to get home, and then told him what he had to do after he got home. And it is the strangest instruction in Greek myth. Take an oar, walk inland. Keep walking away from the sea until you come to a people who know nothing about ships, who put no salt on their food, who have never seen a painted hull. Keep going until a stranger on the road looks at the thing on your shoulder and asks why you are carrying a winnowing fan. That is the place. Plant the oar in the ground there. Sacrifice to Poseidon, then go home. Think about what that actually asks of him. He has to walk until he finds somewhere so far from the sea that the sea has no meaning. And the sign that he has arrived is that someone mistakes the tool of his entire life for a farming implement. He has to keep going until his identity stops being legible to anybody. The man who spent 20 years trying to get home is told that he has to leave again. And Homer never shows it. The poem ends before he goes. It is a homecoming with an appointment attached, and we never see him keep it. Then, said Tiresias, death will come to him ex halos, gently, in a comfortable old age, with his people prosperous around him. Ex halos, out of the sea, or away from the sea. The phrase is genuinely ambiguous in Greek, and ancient readers were already split on it, which is either the gentlest promise in the poem, or a threat wearing a promise's clothes. Later Greeks decided it was a threat. Homer never tells us how Odysseus dies, so other people did. The Greek version, there was a lost epic called the Telegony, attributed to a poet from Cyrene in the 6th century BC. We have it only through an ancient summary, and it says this: Odysseus had a son by Circe. His name was Telegonus. Born far away, he grew up and went looking for the father he had never met. He landed on Ithaca, not knowing where he was, and started raiding the countryside for food. Odysseus came out to defend his island against the raiders, and in the fight, the young man killed the old one with a spear tipped with the spine of a stingray. Death out of the sea. He does not even recognize his son. The great recognizer, the man of the scar and the bed and the orchard, dies without being recognized, killed by a boy he never met in a fight over food on the beach of the island he spent 20 years trying to reach. The Greeks then made it stranger. In the surviving summaries, Telegonus marries Penelope, and Telemachus marries Circe. The Roman version, and here his reputation collapses. Rome traced its own foundation myth to a Trojan refugee, which makes the Greeks the villains, and makes the man who invented the horse the villain in chief. In Virgil, he is Dirus Ulysses, dread, cruel Ulysses. The trickster becomes a war criminal, because the Greeks had already started it. In Sophocles' Philoctetes, he is a manipulator, who argues that lying is fine if it works. In Euripides, he is the politician who makes the case for killing a child. The medieval version, Dante puts him in hell. In the Inferno, Ulysses is in the 8th circle, wrapped in a tongue of flame, punished among those who gave false counsel. And Dante, who could not read Greek and knew the story only through Latin sources, invents an entirely new ending for him. In Dante's version, he never stays home. He gets old on Ithaca and cannot bear it, and talks his surviving crew into one last voyage, out through the Strait of Gibraltar, past the edge of the known world. He tells them they were not made to live like animals, but to pursue knowledge. They sail for 5 months. They see a mountain rising out of the ocean, and a storm comes off it and takes the ship down. Dante damns him for it. And then, 500 years later, Tennyson takes the same idea and makes it noble instead. An old king refusing to sit still, sailing west to die usefully. Same man, same voyage. One poet calls it damnation, the other calls it courage. That is what has been happening to this character for 2,800 years. Every age looks at Odysseus and sees whatever it thinks intelligence is for. So how does a story survive 28 centuries? Not by being written down. Not at first. For a long time, nobody could explain how poems this long could exist in a society that could not write. Then, in the 1930s, an American scholar named Milman Parry went to what was then Yugoslavia with a recording machine and sat with village singers who performed enormous heroic poems from memory. And he worked out what they were doing. They were not memorizing. They were composing live out of prefabricated pieces, set phrases sized to fit the rhythm, dropped in as needed, which explains something odd about Homer that readers had noticed for centuries and never understood. The repetition. Rosy-fingered dawn, swift-footed Achilles, the wine-dark sea. Those are not decorations. They are load-bearing. How a singer keeps a story of that size in the air? So who was Homer? Honestly, we do not know. Possibly one poet, possibly two. Some ancient scholars already argued the Iliad and the Odyssey had different authors. Possibly a tradition that a name got attached to. The poems were composed in a dialect nobody ever actually spoke. A mixture built for the meter. And then the text got lucky, repeatedly. It got written down in the 8th or 7th century BC on the newly borrowed alphabet. It became the backbone of Greek education. Greek children learned to read on it for 1,000 years. It was edited at the Great Library at Alexandria, where scholars divided each poem into the 24 books we still use. Copies went out across the ancient world. Scraps of it keep turning up in Egyptian rubbish dumps. Then Rome loved it. Then Byzantium copied it. The single most important manuscript is a 10th century Byzantine book that also preserves the notes of those Alexandrian scholars in its margins, which is how we know what they thought. Then Renaissance Italy printed it in 1488. Then every generation since has translated it, argued about it, and rewritten it. James Joyce made it a single day in Dublin in 1904. Derek Walcott moved it to the Caribbean. Margaret Atwood retold it from the point of view of the 12 hanged maids. And this year, a film released it back into the mainstream. So hard that search interest in a 2,800-year-old poem hit its highest level in Google's records. The reason it survives is not the monsters. It survives because it is the first story in the Western tradition about coming back. And because the culture keeps needing that story and keeps not being finished with it. So, what is the Odyssey actually about? It is not about a hero. The poem goes out of its way to stop you thinking that. It gives him a name that means pain. It makes him lie to his wife, threaten his childhood nurse, hang 12 women, and torment his own father in an orchard. It compares him, in his moment of deepest grief, to a woman dragged into slavery by men exactly like him. A modern framework worth naming. The psychiatrist Jonathan Shea read the poem against his clinical work with combat veterans, arguing it describes the difficulty of coming home with unusual precision. That is a modern interpretation applied to an ancient text, not what Homer meant. It is also very hard to unsee. And it is not really about the sea either. Look at what the story is, structurally. A man leaves home. Everything he has is destroyed. Everyone who left with him dies. He is offered, in order, forgetting, comfort, knowledge, love, immortality. 5 different ways of never having to go back. And he turns all 5 of them down. And when he finally arrives, he does not walk in. He stands outside his own house in disguise and tests everyone in it. Because after 20 years, he cannot tell anymore whether home is still there, or whether it is a place he invented to keep himself alive on the water. That is the real question the poem is asking. Not will he get home. He gets home in book 13, with 11 books still to go. The question is whether there is anything left to get home to. Whether the man who walks through the door is the man who left. Whether Penelope, who has done her own 20 years, in a house full of men, holding a kingdom together with unfinished weaving, is still married to the person she is looking at. And the poem's answer is that bed. A bed built into a living tree, growing out of the ground, that cannot be moved without destroying it. Rooted, immovable, the one thing in the whole story that stayed exactly where it was. That is what they check. Not his face. His face has changed. Not his story. His stories are all lies. They check whether the thing they built together is still standing. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the whole thing, properly, with the parts nobody keeps. Subscribe, there's a lot more where this came from. Because here is what the Odyssey has been asking for 2,800 years. And it is not a question about Greece. Can a person survive war, and monsters, and temptation, and loss, and 20 years of becoming somebody else, and still come home as the same person? Homer does not answer it. He just puts a man in a doorway, and a woman across the room, and a bed that never moved, and leaves the rest to you.